Hey everyone, you're listening to the Infatuasian podcast. Now, I know I'm not supposed to have favorites, but this episode definitely ranks up there for me. I got a chance to speak with actor Perry Young. You might know him as Father Jun on the HBO series Warrior. Perry was such a great guest for so many reasons. Number one, he's in a show that's really special to me, and I'll talk about that more in a second. Number two, he's a fantastic storyteller, and you'll hear that from the get-go. And number three, he's an Asian American history scholar. And for those of you AAPI nerds out there, this is going to be a real treat for you. We talked for well over an hour, and I know we could have talked for several hours more. Warrior, the show that started on Cinemax and ended up on HBO, and now you can watch streaming on Max, is based on Bruce Lee's writings from over 50 years ago. The show takes place in San Francisco in the 1870s, and it shows some of the struggles that our ancestors faced in the early days here in America. I messed up and said that my ancestors came here in the 1950s, but what I meant to say was that my great-great-grandfather came over here in the 1850s, and my great-great-grandmother came as I think she was 17 or 18-year-old mail-order bride a few years later. So props to her for having the guts to come out here without ever meeting her husband beforehand. Wow, that's kind of nuts. So this show, Warrior, is the first time that I've ever seen a show that comes close at all to showing what life was like back then for my ancestors. And so when I watch it, I can't help but think, was my family in the background? Was my family one of those people that were dealing with those sorts of things that they deal with in the show? Now, of course, my ancestors were not kung fu warriors, but it still makes me think. And I love this show for helping me do that. Now, of course, there's some fictional drama layered on top of it to make it entertaining, but it's still based on facts, and it's still based, the time period is shown in a way that I've never seen before. So this is such a really, really special show. And we're in season 3, which dropped a couple weeks ago. And purely coincidentally, this episode is going to drop a few days after the 50th anniversary of Bruce Lee's death in 1973. But man, he will never die in our memories, and the impact that he's had for Chinese Americans and all Americans in many ways. So Perry and I would like to dedicate this episode to Bruce and his family and just all that he meant to us. So, you know what? That's enough of me. So it's time to get into our time with Perry, who is also a master craftsman and musician who plays the bamboo shakuhachi flute, which you'll hear in our intro today, as well as our outro. So as usual, we hope that you enjoy this episode, and thanks so much for listening. Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the Infatuasian podcast, a show where we aim to elevate and highlight Asian culture and creators. Today we have a really special guest today because I started a list. When I started this podcast, I started a list about 2 years ago. And one of the things I put on the list was I wanted to talk about Warrior because it's kind of an important show, and I'll tell you guys why in a minute. But I wanted to do a show on Warrior, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to just do me talking about it or maybe try to find someone. I messaged Shannon Lee. She never got back to me, but so I threw out a couple DMs, and no one got back to me until just recently. I got a DM back from Father Jun himself. So today we are honored to have Oakland born and raised Perry Young with us. Hey Perry, how's it going?
Hey, thank you, Curtis. Thank you so much. Yeah, one of the reasons, I love to promote our show, and I really think it's an important show, like you said. And I don't answer on my DMs. So when I see someone from the Bay Area, I mean, that's my home, So
Yeah.
I do love the Bay, and I do think our show is important. But so thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Shout out to Oaktown.
Yes, Oaktown.
And I like to greet our guests in the Asian way. So it's about lunchtime over there. So I'm going to ask, have you eaten yet? You sick fun, man?
Sikdola.
Oh, good. What do we have today? Leftovers? You cook something?
I had granola for breakfast. I'm gonna have lunch after this, so I might go to Happy Hunan, a great great Hunan restaurant by me. So,
nice. And then we're in New York City, you said?
Yes, we are. We are on the Upper West Side, and I like to think of it actually as the south of Harlem.
Yeah.
We're right on the edge, so it's a really vibrant neighborhood. It's really it wasn't so safe when I moved in here 30 years ago, but it's like New York City, it's alive. It's an evolving character. It's changing, and it's a very different place today.
Yeah, and if you listen carefully, you can hear horns honking outside Barry's window. We got a little bit of a strike and a demonstration going on, but
yeah, it's New York City.
Yeah,
there
right?
You go.
Right. You know what? One thing I had over on the Upper West Side was Cuban Chinese food.
Oh,
over by
special
by Columbia, right? Kind of Spanish Harlem over there. Yeah.
Yes. They are kind of a dying breed, unfortunately, but it's a really special place in New York City because of all the immigration from the Chinese indentured servitude boats to Cuba, and then the immigration from Cuba to New York City. Yeah. And these restaurants only exist in New York City and possibly in Florida.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing. Yeah. There's one that we go to all the time called Flora de Mayo. And this, it's just, it's full of a lot of Latino Puerto Rican people. They love this sort of special mix, and so do we.
Yeah. Yeah. You got like the yellow rice with the chicken on top and the broth.
Oh, that chicken is amazing. And then they have this special thing, this squid juice, squid ink fried rice. It's a purple fried rice that I don't see in Chinese, quote, traditional Chinese restaurants. It's really good.
It's that Caribbean flavor. No, I love it.
Yeah.
So I also read that you got a BFA from San Francisco State.
Yes, my old alma mater. I studied fine art when I was in school at San Francisco State. Yeah. Nice. And then I minored in Asian American Studies.
Ah, great. Yeah, that was a good time. I mean, there's been some important things that happened at San Francisco State with ethnic studies and Asian American studies. So it was kind of one of the first Asian American studies programs, if I recall correctly.
I think it was the first. I mean, Berkeley seems to claim to be the first, but it was the SF State students that struck, for the ethnic studies department. And, it's quite historical. You can read up and find, if you Google it, all the students who were striking. It's also about solidarity because it was the Latin students, the Black students, and the Asian students that got together to form the ethnic studies department. And, there's pictures of cops beating them.
Yeah.
It's pretty insane. I mean, one of my teachers who was Lorraine Chiu, who was starred in Wayne Wong's films, Dim Sum, was one of those students that was, beaten. And she wrote extensively about it, ending up in jail, just because she wanted ethnic study classes. So that's pretty insane.
Yeah. No, there's a long history. Have you seen the movie Chinatown Rising by Harry Chuck and Josh Chuck? It's a small little indie. It's very small, but they document that era a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When did it come out?
It came out during the pandemic, but I don't know if you can see it anywhere. It should be on PBS once in a while. You'll see it streaming on PBS.
Okay.
Hey, can we dig into your roots a little bit?
Let's dig in.
All right. So Chinese American, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Are you Toisan too?
Yeah, Toisan. My father's from a little village, the Young Clan, a little village in Toisan, and my mom's from New Territories in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm first and fourth generation. So my great grandfather immigrated and worked on the railroads and became a laundryman in Chicago. But I was the firstborn in America. It's and I didn't really understand why, but until I went and studied Chinese American history. It's like learning about the Page Act preventing Asian women from coming into the country, and the Chinese Exclusion Act preventing Chinese from entering the country. And so my great grandfather was never able to bring his sons until the lifting of the Exclusion Act, and then the quotas after that until 1965.
Yeah.
So it's like after 4 generations, I'm the first to be born here. It's pretty crazy.
That's amazing. Yeah, I bet our ancestors bump shoulders once in a while, because a similar history where I have a great grandfather who came here and then couldn't get married because there weren't any women out here, so went back home. So my grandfather's born in China, but then my dad was born here. They came back in the 30s, I think, maybe late 20s. And so, I bet the youngs and the chins, bump shoulders once in a while.
Absolutely. And it's not uncommon, right? In Chinese to have this sort of breaking up of our lineage, our immigration lineage, because of the laws. So everybody in Chinatown, I mean, very few of us had grandmothers, right? Because our grandmothers could not immigrate. And we all told the same stories, so it's like, it's a sort of an unknown story to many. But to us in Chinatown, it's sort of a common story to be removed, several generations.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to say, are you first generation or are you technically fifth generation? Like, how does it work?
Depending on who you ask, right? The people who make the laws or the people who just came, and it's, so yeah.
Oh man, I think we're gonna have fun today, Perry. We're gonna talk a little bit more about this. Yeah. So, as a kid, were you at all the actor that you are now? Did you have a creative side? Did you have you're a musician as well? What did you do as a kid? Piano lessons, or what happened for you?
Not at all. I was a Chinatown kid that was at risk, in Oakland, Chinatown, and. I was growing up in the 70s, very well the Golden Dragon shooting, the gangs, the Wah Chings versus the Joe Boys, all the stuff in San Francisco gangs. Yeah. And my cousin was in San Francisco who immigrated and then had to get out because they wanted protection money. Yeah. So, I mean, I was, that kind of, Chinatown family. But I would say that I was very creative, being the youngest of 3 boys. My parents kind of left me home to be babysat by the television. So I found ways to entertain myself. But I was never formally trained in any of the arts, except for shakuhachi, the bamboo flute.
Nice. We'll talk about the shakuhachi in a little bit, but so you're not exactly straight up gangster, but you're like one of those kids who's kind of, hanging in the alleys a little bit,
Well, that's the thing, if you're a Chinatown kid in that time, if you were in a cluster of more than 2 and 3, you were a gang, right? And it was just your buddies and you going out and walking around, but just because you were, an ethnic group clinging together for survival, but we could be seen as a gang simply because, we wanted to stick together for safety. Because, like growing up in the 70s in Oakland, it was not that safe, or we'd get picked on. There was tension between, the communities and things like that. So definitely there was safety in numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. But then you go into SF State as a fine art major. So where did that come from?
Yeah, that's very uncommon, right? And I would say that I owe that to the openness of my parents. They were just they were immigrants, right? They got here, they're just trying to find a way to survive. They worked all the traditional archetypal Chinese American jobs. My dad was a chef, a laundryman, a truck driver, and my mother was a seamstress. Things, and a babysitter, and they did things like that. They worked probably 2 jobs, and 12 hours a day. And thus I didn't have that kind of, helicopter parenting. It was the opposite. Right. Like many of my friends in Chinatown, their parents are working very often. So the fact that I had, the luxury of deciding what I wanted to study was kind of amazing, because some of my parents weren't hands-on in the same way as many second generation immigrants who were lucky to have parents to guide them through academia and future career opportunities. My parents were like, just work hard and respect the family, just don't shame us, right?
Right.
And I was lucky to see them work hard and still be able to enjoy their lives no matter how hard they worked. They had a community. They went to dim sum every Sunday. They spent time with their family. They played mahjong every Friday and Saturday nights. And then they worked their butts off Monday through Friday, you know?
Yeah.
And I was lucky to see them enjoy their life, even though they were working hard and struggling as the first generation immigrants.
Yeah. You know, I gotta get some of those older folks on just to get their history on tape, you know, because they're getting to that age, you know, late 80s and 90s where, you know, they got the stories, but we gotta archive this a little bit. We gotta document it a little bit more.
Seriously, there's a lot of stories out there, right? You know, I don't know if you saw Allegiance with George Takei. I mean, that's his story, right? To write the story of his family, you know, and get it on Broadway. That's quite amazing. And there's so many other stories. I don't know if you heard of this musical called On Gold Mountain. It's composed by Jason Ma, a theater actor here in New York City, a friend of mine, and they put it up recently in Utah Shakespeare Festival, and it's coming to New York. But you know, it's just, you know, it's these people telling the stories of our ancestors, and we need more of that today, right?
Absolutely.
It's pretty clear that if we had more stories defining us as and our history and legacies in America, that there might be less violence, you know, perpetrated upon our people,
or at least more understanding.
Yeah.
Hey, man, let's get into that. We're going to talk a little bit about a couple shows that do a little bit of that. For those who don't know, Perry is an actor and musician. And based on my little searching, you've been acting a little more than 2 decades or so?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you're technically correct, but it's been over 3 decades.
Okay. Okay. More on stage early days. Were you doing more stage work than film?
Definitely. When I moved to New York right after SF State, I was a fine arts music major, and I just wanted to like start doing art as soon as possible. And I realized very quickly that everybody in New York City is just working to pay the rent. You know, that's like everybody I met was like, I'm just trying to pay the rent. And then everybody's living in a little box. And so I didn't have much room to make art. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to try to make music. At least that way I meet people and I get to rehearse in someone else's place, you know?
Right.
And then, so I just started to audition for things. And I was just really super incredibly lucky that I saw this audition for experimental theater called Havoc in Gold Mountain. And it was a collaboration of 7 Chinese American artists using performance art, music, dance, theater to tell the story of the Chinese in America. And one of the composer was Fred Ho, who was an amazing activist musician. And so I got into that production, and everybody was like, "Oh wow, you know, like, can you do this? Can you do this?" And suddenly I'm acting, you know, and I got a paycheck. For being an actor. And so I was like, oh shoot, I better like learn how to act, you know? And so I mean, I had really loved acting, you know, watching, you know, some like Asian American theater company in San Francisco. But I hadn't done any acting. I had done some performance art as an artist and music, so I understood what it was like to be on stage and to perform, but not necessarily as a classical actor with text, speech, a play. So that started me off being in an experimental theater dance production. And then people saw me, like Tisa Chang from Pan Asian Rep said, "Oh, would you like to audition for the show I'm doing?" And I went, sure. And then there was, you know, then I learned some more chops for musical theater. And then, you know, so things started rolling once you do one thing in New York City. And so, so that was 30 years ago. And over time, I realized, oh, I better really study acting, you know, and I got, but it was all theater. It was all theater in the beginning. I had some people recommend that I try television and film, and this was early 90s. There was nothing out there for Asian American man, especially for me at the time. I had long hair. I was a rocker, you know. I mean, if I had that look now, I'd be working, you know. So I went on some auditions. I got an agent, and you know, after a while, it was like, I can't keep auditioning for these bus boys and rickshaw drivers for Sprint, you know, television, TV commercials, and it was all just bad stuff. There was nothing. It was, you know, the best thing you could watch was a John Woo movie, right? Hong Kong movies,
right?
I mean, you know, and then, you know, the most incredible thing happened. Jason Scott Lee showed up with Map of the Human Heart and the Bruce Lee biop. I remember sitting there in New York City in this kitchen and opening the New York Times entertainment section for the weekend. And there were 2 full-page ads. One side was for the Bruce Lee biop, and the other side was for Map of the Human Heart. Wow. And it was like the first time I saw a leading man, 2 full-page ads on the New York Times back to back. And his was the same guy.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was a moment.
Yeah. We've talked to a few folks. Do you know Kelvin Han Yee? Have you ever worked with him?
I know Kelvin. I love Kelvin.
Another city boy, yeah. So we did an interview with him, and same era, right? He was just coming up, Asian American Theater Company, and getting some great roles on stage. But TV and movies, it was always Chinese gangster or busboy.
Absolutely. I mean, he was the first Asian American actor. Actually, I'm doing what I'm doing because of Kelvin.
Really?
I saw him in Yankee Dog You Die.
Philip
AATC. Philip Katana, AATC in Berkeley Rep probably. I'm not sure. No, it was AATC presented in Berkeley in a small theater. And I was in college at SF State, and I went, that guy looks like he's having fun. I mean, actually it was Sab Shimono too, so it was amazing.
Yeah.
And I thought, those guys are having way more fun than a fine artist painting on a canvas in a studio, And I thought, how can I do that? But it seems so far removed from me because I was just, I was like a kid, 19, 20, and here were these 2 guys, being on stage and just being badass.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then around that time, The Great Wall came out, Peter Wong's film.
Right.
It was an indie hit. And so I went, oh man, Kelvin Han Yee's a star, He's on the stage. He's on the big screen. I want to be like him,
Yeah.
But I just never thought I could, I just never thought I'd be that kind of actor that he was. And then when I met Kelvin, I actually met him in person because there was some gathering of the Great Wall reunion. Some like an editor, the scenic designer. They were in New York City, and Kelvin was there, and I knew the scenic designer, Wing Lee, and he said, "Hey, Kelvin's coming to this dinner." Actually, it was a director for Father's Son, Patrick Chen. He said, "Kelvin's coming to this dim sum. You want to come?" And I was, "Oh my God, I'm going to meet my hero,"
Yeah.
So that was like 5 years ago.
Nicest guy too.
He's so fun. He's so cool. An inspiration, a big inspiration for what I do. Yeah,
I mean, it's like he still hasn't gotten that total regular role that everyone's looking for, but he's just putting the work in, and he's doing it.
Well, he might be on the James Hong track,
Yeah,
like to have 600 IMDb credits under his name when he's 95. I have just so much respect for these unsung heroes, right? They're just behind the scenes. But I mean, Kelvin's bigger than that. You see him, you see his face,
Everyone's seen him, yeah.
Right. And same with James Hong. A lot of people wouldn't recognize, couldn't name him until maybe Everything Everywhere All at Once. Right. But you would say maybe, that's the guy from Blade Runner,
Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah, Big Trouble from Little China. David Lopan, I want those green eyes,
Everywhere, yeah. So you've been on a bunch of TV shows, too many to name, but Gotham, Blacklist, Blue Bloods, and then I feel like maybe your breakout role was Ping Wu on the Knick. Stephen Soderberg, amazing. Right. I actually haven't seen that. I just found out it's on HBO Max, so I gotta go check it out. But I saw a couple clips, and pretty badass on that show too, Barry. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that was so what happened was, I did a lot of stage, just to back up a little bit. I did a lot of stage. There was nothing for me in film and TV. Mm-hmm. And then I discovered the Japanese flute. And then I went to Japan to study it and sort of totally detracted from my theater acting career. And then I came back with a child and I went, oh my God, I got to make a living, right? So I dropped out of acting because it was just, I couldn't survive as an actor, but I could survive as a shakuhachi maker and repairman. So I did that and became the stay-at-home dad for 10 years. And then, around 2013, I went, you know what? I'm really getting the itch for the stage again. So, but I can't go back to the stage because it doesn't pay enough. If I'm going to spend time away from my family, It's got to like bring in some income.
Yeah.
And then I saw this audition for the Knick, and I went, you know what? I'm gonna go for it, you know. And I auditioned, and lo and behold, they cast me, and I was like, oh my effing
I'm
God.
on a show, yeah.
You know, I hadn't even thought I was castable up until this time, you know. But things started to shift. I started to, you know, Lost was on TV with Daniel Day Kim. Elementary, Better Luck Tomorrow with Justin Lin happened. Netflix came. We started seeing original content. We started seeing AAPI, NH faces that were like nondescript, that were not written for Asian characters. Non-traditional casting in theater started to happen, where we can audition for things that were not race specific. So all that happened in the time I dropped out of theater, you know, and then I thought, okay, it's time to come back. And then I auditioned and got in the Knick. And let me tell you, I was really super lucky to have a friend, Cole Sutter, who was a film and theater actor, who said, dude, you know, let me help you with this audition, you know, because auditioning for film and TV is so different than performing for the stage. And I learned right away at that first session with my friend Cole. He was like, whoa, take it down a notch, you know.
You're projecting your
camera's right in your face, you know, you just got to whisper. And you know, inside voice, you know. So because of him, I got the call back, and I had driven to Maine for a summer vacation, and then I got the call back. I'm like, holy smoke, should I drive back to New York City for a call back? It's an 8-hour drive, you know. And my partner then said, you know, I wasn't going to do it. And because like, I've been in plenty of callbacks, and there's like 20 people there, and you're like, oh my God, you know. Because it was going to cost me money and time. I had to rent a car and all this stuff. And anyway, my partner Morris says, well, if you don't do it, you'll never know. You know, and I went, okay, here he goes. You know, rented a car, you know, drove back to New York City, spent a night with my friend Cole, who then tutored me for the audition for the callback. Did the callback, and it was like, okay, the very typical, thank you, great, you hear from us or not, you know. Drove home. I was driving home going, you know, I just wasted, you know, $200 on this car rental, gas, you know, missed my family for 2 days on this vacation. And then I get pulled over by a cop, you know, for speeding. And I went, oh, man.
Another $300.
Yeah, I'm like, this is just a effing waste, you know, like I'm going to get, you know, and I'm going to get a point on my driver's license. It was just a big waste of time. And then I got back, and the next day they called and said, Stephen wants you. I literally screamed into the phone, and then the person on the other side was laughing. You know, my Mora comes running up. What is it? I said, Stephen Soderberg wants me. You know, and she goes, hold on. You know, the person on the other side of the phone said, we got to get the okay from the studio first. But I just want to let you know, you're Stephen's number one. I was like, oh my God! If I got there,
that's a win.
It was just like, it's a win, you know, considering I had just not been acting for 10 years, you know.
Right.
And then the next day they called and said, you have a lawyer, we'll be sending the contract, you know. Wow. I just couldn't believe it was happening. Neither of us, my partner Maura, who's in the theater artist also and dancer, was just like, this is that moment. This is that moment in your life where your life changes, you know. And it was that, and you know what? The whole time I was shooting, I just was shitting in my pants, because I was like, I did not.
What am I doing here?
What am I doing here? You know, like I understand how to behave on stage. I understand the craft of stage acting, but I didn't understand the camera. I didn't understand a lot of the jargon of being in front of the camera. You know, and I didn't understand the hierarchy, the pecking order of these assistants that would come and say, okay, Mr. Young, come with me now. It's like, well, where are we going? You know, like, well, they're switching cameras. They're turning the camera around, you know, and it's like, what does that mean? It's like, you know, I just didn't understand how the set works. Oh, they're going to take 3 shots. I get it, from different angles. I get it. So, but I look at the Knick, and it was basically how I was born. On my film career. That's my birthplace as being a television actor. I look at like, wow, I've you know, I had a lot to learn.
That goes to show you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
Absolutely.
Now, did that translate? Did you ever hear from like Justin Lin saying, hey, I saw you on the Knick, and that's why I need you as Father Jun? Like,
No, no, that never happened.
Okay,
And
okay.
I still like for Warrior, I had seen this was around 2017, right? That when I first, or possibly 16, 2000. So I had done the Knick in 2014, and when I saw a Deadline article, Deadline is our industry website about acting and projects, that Warrior was announced, and it's by Justin Lin and the daughter of Bruce Lee, Shannon Lee. Yeah. I went, oh my God, I gotta audition for this no matter what. I gotta, this would be the best thing that someone like me could land, right?
Absolutely.
And so I called my manager and said, look, when they start auditioning for this, I will audition for anything. I will, any role, whatever, one line, I will do it,
Right.
And of course she goes, okay, I'll let you know. And so late 2017, over a year later, my manager says, here's a call for Warrior. They want to see you as the head of this notorious Tong, Father Jun. I went, whoa, it's an actual role.
Yeah,
it's a recurring role.
Yeah.
And the breakdown was Father Jun, 60s to 70 years old, shock of white hair, milky eye, leads with an iron fist, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's not me.
Right, not yet.
But hey, if the casting agent accept our submission, I'm gonna audition the hell out of this role,
Yeah.
And it was a difficult role to audition because it was basically 2 monologues, and oftentimes the monologues are much harder because you're not feeding off the energy of the reader. Or the other person, just to have to show like the sort of choices you're making and relationships and things like that. So when you do a monologue, you basically 100% present your idea, and it's kind of nerve-wracking.
Sure.
So I went into the audition. I remember pretty clearly, because I like to meditate right before these things just to clear the plate, and that morning I was right after my meditation, my Mora goes, hey, aren't you taking Sasa, our oldest son, to his high school orientation? I was like, oh my God, I got to go to this high school orientation, deal with all of that mess right before this audition. And the high school orientation was scheduled at 10. My audition was at 12. I was like, oh my God, I might just make it. So it went late. It was going late. I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I got to start like chill again. So we get out. I put my son in the cab to go home. I get in another cab. I go downtown. I get into the Alexa Vogel's the casting agent's office. I run in there. I'm like, I have like 3 minutes before my call. I'm like sweating, and I went, okay, I got 3 minutes to meditate. And as soon as I closed my eyes, her assistant goes, oh, Perry Young, are you ready? I was like, oh my God. Okay, now I'm gonna go. And I was like, of course I'm ready, So I go in there, and they go, great, you want to just start? Here's the camera, and go. And so I do my monologue, and she goes, turns off the camera and goes, okay, just stop what you're doing. They want someone really grounded. Just stop what you're doing and try it again. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I wasn't doing anything.
This,
I was just trying to be chill. Maybe all that tension was showing up on my face from being late, from being at the my son's orientation. So I said, this is my moment, man. This is my moment. I turned around. I said, okay, give me a second. I turned around, turned away from the camera, and I went, be like water. Yeah. This is Bruce. This is Bruce speaking to me. I got to channel him. I turned around and I said, this is my moment. And I did the monologue, and she turned off the camera and went, great, let's do the other one. So I did the other monologue, and she goes, that's great. Yeah, well, we'll see you around.
We'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll let you know. It was very like, they say that to everyone, right? You have no idea what's going to happen. Right. They have no idea what's going to happen. Yeah. They're just going to send the tape off to Justin and Jonathan Tropper and Shannon Lee, right? They'll look at it and go, who's Father Jun? And then I went on vacation again. I went to Rhode Island, and we were there for a week, and it was going to be Memorial Day. And I knew I was going to hear from the casting agent for like 4 days because it was a long weekend. And then on that 4th day, I got a message from my manager to say, call me. I went, okay, this is it. I was driving back to New York from Rhode Island. I pulled over the car with the family. I called my manager, and she goes, they want you for Warrior. And I was like, I screamed in the car again, and my family is just like, oh, this is how it happens,
Yeah.
And a month later, I was in South Africa filming.
They filmed in South Africa. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Our Chinatown set, everything. The whole production is filmed in Cape Town, South Africa.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a backlot called Cape Town Film Studios, film production company studios. It's a big studio, just like Paramount or Universal Studios, with a lot of backlot streets and airplane hangars for the interiors.
Wow.
They film other television shows and movies there, and they built a Chinatown.
Nice.
Yeah, they built a Chinatown for us.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone out there has not watched Warrior, but we're talking about HBO. Well, it was Cinemax, and now it's HBO show about Chinatown in the 1970s. And it's based on, so I guess the story is that Shannon Lee just found like 30 pages of notes from her dad, Bruce Lee, about his concept of this dude, kind of a wandering warrior from China, comes to America and has to deal with racism and gangs and all this stuff. And it's Andrew Koji is the lead in this, and Perry plays the lead of the Hop Wei Tong, and he is the father. Well, he was the lead of the gang. He plays Father Jun, who's the father to Young Jun, and it is amazing. It is just an amazing show, and I my roots go back to San Francisco in the late 1950s is when my ancestors came over. So when I watched that show, it makes me wonder, like, was my great grandma walking on those streets? Was she getting her laundry kicked over by the Irish, or what was it like? And I know it's a drama, it's fiction, right? But it makes me think, what was like, and I think that if anything, that show at least does that, to show that we were there from the beginning. There's people who've been in this country for 170 years.
Right. Let me make a quick correction. I think I heard you say 1970s, but it's 1870s. Right. So basically, the writers do a lot of research. They have assistants to do all the research, and it's pretty much factual what happens in our show in terms of events. But the story is dramatized.
Sure.
But the first episode mentions the Chinese Exclusion Act three times, and that's real law that those Chinese people, our ancestors, were worried about, right?
Yeah.
And the Yellow Peril time that was started by these politicians, it's real. Our show dramatizes how they were like, let's pit the Chinese against the Irish to see who's going to work for less so that we can make more money. And it was basically how politicians and capitalists work together to pit the lowest rung of the ladder, immigrants, against each other so that capitalism can flourish. So our show captures that part of American history. Absolutely. That is quite true. And that's, I think, a large part of our audience, that loves our show because of the historical accuracy. It's a period piece.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, write on my DMs all the time or my feeds. I never knew that that's how America started. And now it makes a lot of sense, that why we're still villainizing Mexicans and Muslims and Sikh people, it still makes a lot of sense that they're taking our jobs. That's the narrative. Slogan, that political slogan has never gone away. They're taking our jobs.
Yeah.
Right. That's where it starts, with the Chinese and the Irish.
Yeah. There was literally a politician. I think it was Kearney who said, the Chinese must go. That was his political.
Wow. Yeah,
that was his statement. That's his platform, was the Chinese must go. Yeah.
Right. I mean, Warrior is an incredibly educational, powerful educational show, aside from its entertainment value.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a lot of this. It creates a lot of dialogue. You can talk about all aspects of this show. Why were there no women there? Why were the women in brothels? All those are because of racist laws. When you go back to the Page Act, preventing Asian women from coming into the country, where at some point, I think there was I can't remember the numbers exactly, but to every 100 men, there were only 2 women in Chinatown, so it's like, and they were the wives of the business owners. So all these other women had to be smuggled in for the, nefarious reasons, and, but we should be able to talk about that clearly. Why was that? Why were there brothels? It wasn't because, Asian women are prostitutes in general. They were kidnapped, and smuggled into America. In the same way that all the Chinese indentured servants, were fooled into signing these indentured servant contracts, not knowing what they were saying because most Chinese were illiterate at the time. So like we should talk about what capitalism does to people. This show does that in a very entertaining way.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's incredibly entertaining. Like even like the fight scenes and the drama around it. But yeah, there's those subtle nods to history. Like I think we did a show. We talked a little bit about Cameron House in San Francisco, which was a Presbyterian woman, and she kind of created a safe haven for the women in the brothels. And they show that in the show a little bit. They don't name her Donaldina Cameron, but they show that a little bit.
But that's a historical figure. That's real, right? So it's things like that. These details in our show that makes our show rich, because if you do know the history, there was our character Nellie represents that woman who liberated a lot of the Chinese prostitutes, and that house is still in Chinatown today, right? And it's an art center. I think it's a community art center, right? Which is amazing. So I saw who was it? A local choreographer in San Francisco, Lenora Lee, maybe. She does Asian American dance, modern dance, and she had a production in that house that was moving around the house where you could see different kind of tableaus of dance happen in the house. Quite beautiful work. Wow. I think her name was Lenora Lee. But yeah, that house, I'm glad that house is serving a purpose in Chinatown. But I want to touch back on something really simple that you said quickly, is that story of Warrior that Bruce Lee wrote down, his idea actually was appropriated by Warner Brothers to be Kung Fu of the 70s with David Carradine.
Carradine.
It's the same story, although Warner Brothers denies it. It's in the book from Bruce Lee's wife, Linda Lee. And she mentions that, how she pitched it to them and they said, no, thank you, and it's also in the Bruce Lee biop, right? Like he pitched to the studio, and the actor who I forgot his name, Wagner, who plays sort of his manager, says, they're never going to buy an Asian as a lead. Hey, 50 years later, Andrew Koji is that lead.
I'm so glad that she kept the vision alive. She kept that fire alive, was able to leverage it and get someone like Justin Lee, famous for Fast and Furious. You had to build your name somewhere.
I have so much respect for Shannon. The way that she's shepherding her father's legacy is so amazing. It's so full of heart and love, and it's actually reaching a whole other generation that may have only heard of Bruce Lee but have not felt his power. So now they do.
The cool, they have a new mural in Chinatown with her dad on it, so it's all
in three Chinatowns, one in LA and one in New York City too. And they were all done in conjunction with the opening of season 3, and I think the 50-year legacy of his death.
So let's talk a little bit about Father Jun. I want to hear from you. How do you describe Father Jun?
Well, when I first read the words, right? So I have to base my characters as an actor. I just have to see who this person is that they wrote, and see if I could find that person in me authentically. And the lines told me that he was a revolutionary. He was an activist. He created the most powerful tong in Chinatown to prevent the violence of the ducks upon our people. That's what he stood for. When he indoctrinated Assam into the Hop Wei, he said, this is why we do what we do, is to protect our people, right? Because one thing our show also shows is that there's riots in Chinatown. They have burnt Chinatowns down, Seattle, Los Angeles, the mining massacres. You never see that stuff told on television until our show, which is quite amazing. So Father Jun is a revolutionary. So when I read the lines, I went, you know what? There's a monologue that was cut out, right? That's where Father Jun tells his history. When he was in China, he fought the Opium Wars, and he stabbed this British soldier. And when that soldier stabbed, what was it? There was a line, I can't remember. And I pulled that dagger out of my eye, right? That's where he got the white eye. I pulled that dagger down out of my eye, and I made him eat it. He was a soldier, but I was a warrior. So they cut that scene out. Yeah. So it told the history of Father Jun. So he had fought the Opium Wars. He came and he saw the oppression of the Chinese. So he wrote, he was fighting systemic racism, and so I thought that he's the Chinese version of Malcolm X. He's my Malcolm X. He does it for the people, and he's saying by any means necessary, I'm going to protect my people, and that's what I based my character on. So in doing research on Malcolm X, I found that he was quite a caring guy. That is not the narrative that we hear about Malcolm X, right? The white media paints him as a separatist and violent. But if you read up about him, especially I came across writings by Yuri Kochiyama, the Japanese-American activist who was his friend. She said that when she held these meetings, activist meetings in her apartment in Harlem, that Malcolm would come by once in a while and everybody was like, oh, it's Malcolm X here. Malcolm X is here. And then when they would talk to him, he was the most kind and humble guy. So that says a lot about who's telling the story of history, right?
Yeah.
And that made me think about, I have to portray Father Jun, going back to your original story, as a guy that cares about his people. He's not just this notorious leader of the most powerful gang in Chinatown. I mean, I think a lot of people could play that in a flat way.
Sure.
But why? Why is he that way? And for me, it's because Malcolm loved his people and Father Jun loves his people. So if I have that in me as an actor, I could bring that color to the character. And when I tell young Jun that he has to consider his brothers, that if you're going to go out and fight, we don't want to lose any of our brothers in these fights. So think more carefully about waging war, And so I want to bring that humanity, that sort of compassion into the character to make him somebody that maybe people would root for. As opposed to just the antagonist, just the villain, that we want Father Jun to succeed for those reasons.
Yeah. And I think you see that too, that you're not just the caricature of an Asian dad, like this, hey, why you didn't do this? You're not that guy, but you're the
well, there
leader.
Is tough love. There is tough love with Father Jun. I am that guy too, also.
Sure.
But underneath, why didn't you do that? Is because if you don't, you're risking the lives of your brothers. I have to feed that into them. The reason why I'm hard on you is because our success depends on your choices. Our people's lives and livelihoods and safety depends on your choices. That's why I'm hard on you. I want that to come through. And it's kind of funny when people write on my posts like, dude, you remind me of my dad.
I mean,
I would only say lucky you, man,
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I was going to ask you who inspired your character, but I did not expect Malcolm X to be the guy. Do you have any other, did you draw on your own dad at all? Did you draw on, anyone else that for
I did. I drew on my own dad because, I was lucky to not have the typical, just kind of silent, stoic, patriarchal Chinese dad. I think I mentioned earlier, my dad knew how to enjoy life. He was an immigrant. He quickly adopted American culture. He bought his 1954 Rambler, or whatever it was, used. He had a cool car. He had sunglasses. He bought the suit. He looked like Roy Orbison sometimes, And I thought, oh, my dad was cool. He liked, and, he would listen to the Beatles and Elvis in our house next to Chinese opera. So my house, my influence as a musical influences are quite eclectic. So I look to my dad in the sense that he kind of knew how to have fun sometimes too. And but I also based him on some of the archetypal, stereotypical dads that I saw in some of my friends had in Chinatown. Like my friend had a store in Chinatown. He had a grocery store and his father sat at the front as the patriarch and he would just smoke cigarettes and he would just grunt at his kids, and like, okay, that's kind of Father Jun also, So I think as an actor, I always try to bring humanity to the characters so that even if he's written as a sort of a trite archetypal character, that I can show some humanity, a wide range of our people in him.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite scene or a favorite monologue?
Well, actually, I think the first scene when you meet Father Jun, I think that's my favorite monologue, where I put a psalm in his place and I tell him to bow to me because he's nothing but a onion, and that he should learn how to bow. that monologue was also cut short because, I sort of interrogate him in the original script. I say, well, who did you study with? And he will say so-and-so. And I would say, oh, you studied with so-and-so. Oh, so that's why you think you're such a badass. And then I come down on him, So, like I understand that they explained to me, the editors and the showrunner, because I'm sorry, we have to cut the scene because, we can't let things get too long on the opening scene, the opening episode. We want to just give a quick splash of these characters, what they represent, and then like move on, and we'll explore them later on in the other episodes. But I love that monologue because it's a nice little speech, and it just puts him into place, and it kind of gave Father Jun this sort of oratory, like kind of quality, like he's
Shakespearean almost.
Right, and he's a preacher, and it kind of gave me the Malcolm X, image of that he could be sort of given a sermon right now.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
So the end of season 2, however, there's a little bit of a coup d'etat where young Jun, your son, kind of usurps your power and gets the loyalty of the troops. And once you lose the loyalty of the troops, you're kind of out. And so you kind of ride off into the sunset, which is kind of a cool scene. It's still dignified. It's like 6 a.m. or something. You're kind of sneaking out, right? And you're walking away. What are your thoughts on that? Are you you have any fun theories on where you're headed?
Wow, they're all I don't want to give away any spoilers here.
Of course.
It's a big spoiler, right? What happens to Father Jun?
Okay.
And I think this season, when do you air this? When will you publish this?
Oh, this will be maybe next week or so.
Okay, next week. Well, so what happens is there's a big reveal today on today's episode. What happens to Father Jun?
I gotta catch up.
Yeah.
No spoilers. All right. Yeah.
I can't talk about it, but talking about walking away, that scene was the writers didn't. How do I say this humbly? Was that I think they saw that a lot of fans liked Father Jun and they didn't want to kill him off.
Absolutely, fan favorite.
So Father Jun was supposed to die in season 2. Yeah. So, but they didn't know. They didn't want Father Jun to die, so they just played it open, like, okay, we'll just have him walk off, and that's a good way. And I think after that, they didn't really know what was going to happen with season 3. When we left, there was going to be a season 3, and then HBO was sold to Time Warner. Then we lost season 3, so that was tragic. So we just thought that was that. And then when we got greenlit with season 3, because it got sold again to Discovery, and a new head, or an old head, Casey Bloys of HBO said, you know what? We released season 2 during the pandemic. It found a huge audience on HBO Max. And people, they liked the show. And then there was a huge cry from the fans, right, from social media. There was even a group, Chinatown Organization for Media Awareness, who took out a full-page ad in the Hollywood Reporter, because the HBO sent out a press release that says, we support Asian American Pacific Islanders in this time of the pandemic while they're being attacked. We support them. And this one full-page ad called them out and said, if you support AAPI community, renew warrior. Right.
Yes.
So all of this was happening at once, and Jonathan Tropper was in conversation with Casey Bloys, and he said, hey, if you ever want warrior back, I'm sure
we're here.
The cast will be happy to do it. And he said, are you sure? And he goes, and next thing you know, we all got a phone call from Jonathan Tropper saying, hey, if I get season 3 back, are you on board? I was like, F yeah, and he goes, okay, but I don't know what the contract's going to be. It's already expired. You're going to have a new contract. I just want to make sure everyone's coming back in order for me to say, yes, we're going to do this. So, we all came back because we love each other. It's such a tight family. I've never had that kind of experience with a television cast. And so we got season 3. Now the writers went, okay, now what do we do with Father Jun? we didn't know that whether we hadn't resolved it. But if you watch season 3 and you follow Father Jun's arc and journey, I think you'll be amazed, and you'll be like kind of blown away by what these writers, the creativity, the vision of these writers, and what they saw for Father Jun and young Jun, and what it says about father and son relationships, especially Asian on TV. And so I think they just blow it wide open, blow it out of the water. And I can't be more proud and inspired by our writers, and these writers on the most part are not Asian. They're Jonathan Tropper, Josh Stoddard, Evan Endicott, and there are other writers, actually, Black woman, Francisca Hu, Asian woman. I'm so sorry I can't say all your names right now, but there are women of color, sure. and in the past we did have Kenneth Lin in season 1 and 2 that were Chinese American. So we have these white writers that are allies. They're on our side. They want to see change. And Warrior is happening in a time of change, which is very different from previous shows that just kind of use our culture as a background to further their story. We now have today over 10 episodic scripted television shows that centers Asian American, Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiians as the story.
Right.
Right. So it's quite amazing. And we have Oscar winners.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. More than one. And
Michelle Yeoh, Ke Huy Quan. Oh my God, this is an Asian American movie. Everything Everywhere All at Once is Asian American. So was Minari. Before that, it was what? It was The Last Emperor.
Yeah.
In the 1980s. The Last Emperor had 9 Academy nominations, none of them for acting.
Right.
What did that say? What does that say about systemic racism? Institutionalized racism.
No, that was a good night. That was so amazing, and it's a good time. We're not there yet, but American Born Chinese got on Disney. We have so many good shows coming out.
Absolutely.
And be in front and behind the camera, and we're seeing so many good things. And
there's I counted them off the other day. There's like 10 shows, scripted shows.
Yeah.
Centering Asian American voices. It's incredible.
That's very
I never thought I'd see this day.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we're about the same era. So yeah, when Joy Luck Club came out, we thought that was going to be a turning point. We were like, oh, now that, the doors are going to be open, and then nothing for 30 years,
It's really bizarre, isn't it? And I think we can probably if somebody examines economics and the political spectrum, we can see why that is, But I remember I had a meeting, a class when I was doing my Asian American minors. There was a class called Asian Americans in the Mass Media. So this was the mid 80s. There wasn't a whole lot to talk about, Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan, maybe Year of the Dragon. Maybe Year of the Dragon. Yeah, it was right around that time. So there wasn't a lot to talk about. But now, if we had an Asian Americans in the mass media, there's quite a lot to talk about, right?
Yeah.
And I remember representation-wise, like the Year of the Dragon. I don't know if you recall that film with John Lone about Mickey Rourke was a racist cop. There was an Asian woman who was helping this racist cop, and then John Lone was like the Tong leader. And it did not cast a good light on Chinatown. All the Asians were gangsters,
right? Except
for the Asian woman, and she was having sex with Mickey Rourke.
Of course.
And everybody was, the community was boycotting it. The Asian American community, I think Cam Media, at that time was boycotting Year of the Dragon. But the weird thing about all of this is that representation-wise, to see John Lone as a leading man on the screen was still empowering.
Still something, yeah.
Because here was this incredibly handsome man who was incredibly gifted as an actor. And he was just doing his thing, But it might have been the wrong message. But it was like, it was a little problematic, but his charisma, his talent kind of jumped out.
Yeah.
At all of us,
I forgot about John Lone, yeah.
Yeah, he was the last emperor.
Yeah.
He went on to do that, right?
Yeah. Oh man, you know who I want to get on the show. I'm going to try to manifest this. I want Tamlyn Tomita on the show. I think.
Oh yeah,
she was the first for me when I saw her in Karate Kid 2. She was the one, man. I was like, oh man, these
OG.
OG.
She is OG. She's been around. She's seen it. She's done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh man, we could do this all day, but I think we're bumping against the clock a little bit here. We didn't talk about, I was gonna say you're involved 2 ways with the show, Warrior. You're also on the soundtrack with your shakuhachi. How do you say that?
Yeah. Pretty close. Shakuhachi.
Okay, yeah.
It's a Japanese flute. Japanese Zen flute.
And you take a bamboo down to the root and you kind of hollow it out. 4 holes? How many holes we got on that?
It's got 5 holes.
5 holes.
5 finger holes. But you can play all the sounds as the Buddhist monks would say, you could play all the sounds of the world in those 5 holes.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you've been doing that for over 30 years too, huh?
But I got my grant to go to Japan in 2002.
Okay.
But I was making flutes by 93. So 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was making flutes for 10 years because I saw in a show I was doing at La Mama Theater called Oedipus the King. There was a musician in the pit, Yukio Tsuji, who was playing the shakuhachi, among other things, because it was an experimental theater production with drums, guitar, keyboards, and then like a Japanese flute, And when I heard the sound of that flute in the silence of the theater, oh my God, it just changed my world. It just kind of like made you think about the world, reality. And it's one of those instruments. It's like, maybe it's like a voice that you hear sometimes in the middle of the night and you go, oh my God, what is that voice? So that's what that flute did. It's haunting, and it just opens up your mind and your heart at the same time to go, there's another reality. So that musician obviously is an incredible musician, Yukio Tsuji. So because of that, I started to make my own, because at that time I was pretty much a starving artist and I couldn't afford to buy one. And this was pre-internet, so you couldn't just buy a shakuhachi. You couldn't Google either, because there was no Google, no internet.
You couldn't watch YouTube.
nothing except recommendation that he could say, well, you can go to this house of a teacher and he might have a few flutes. And then you would have to buy a flute from him, and then you would have to study with him. And that could be a good thing, or it could be not so good if the flutes weren't good and the teacher wasn't good. So depends on your luck. He goes, but the only way to get a good one is if you go to Japan and go to the house of a maker with a player whom you trust, so that the player can choose a flute for you. Because they're all handmade, and some flutes are duds, and some are incredible. So yeah, I started making, and then I got a grant to go to Japan, and that changed my life. Like I mentioned earlier, it just detracted my acting world, took me away from it. And then my partner and I conceived the baby in Japan. And when we came back, Morris said, well, somebody's got to get insurance, because we were like both artists.
Yeah.
Never had insurance, like many New York artists. We were just living hand to mouth and paycheck to paycheck, living the life. And when we had a kid, we finally went, okay, she went to grad school and I was a stay-at-home dad. And at that same time, the internet came about. And then I realized, I could actually make a living off this, because people are sort of like finding me, And it was another world that I entered and I became a part of. And I thought I said goodbye to acting. I thought I was going to become this sort of monk with bamboo flutes in the studio, because it's like the opposite of the acting world. The shakuhachi is you're alone in a room with a sound, and a craftsman, and you craft with your hands, But the acting world is you're meeting and rubbing shoulders with all kinds of frenetic energy all day long.
Yeah.
With PAs, with catering people, with the makeup, hair, lighting, grip, the director, the writer, and all these
never
people.
Alone.
You're never alone. And all these people have their own agendas, and they need something from you. And you have to like run away and hide and meditate, before you go on camera, all that, So, so that it changed my world. And the funny thing is, at the end of my stay, that first grant in Japan, I did a show with these 2 Buto dance legends and my shakuhachi teacher, Kazuo Ono, and his son Yoshito Ono. So I sort of put the shakuhachi and performance art together in that production. And George Kochi, who was head of the Asian Cultural Council at the time in Japan, came and saw the show, and he said, wow, Perry, you're doing something very unique. You're doing this bamboo flute, and then you're an actor. Like one day those two will come together in a very incredible way.
He saw the future.
and that day was in Warrior, when one of the showrunners with Justin Lin's company, Perfect Storm, Daniel Woodrow, I'm sorry, not showrunner, but producer, Daniel Woodrow, super wonderful woman, said, just asked me out of the blue while we were filming. She goes, Perry, I saw on Instagram you make flutes. Can you tell me about that? And I was like, well, it's a whole other world. It's a very different world from this. It's just not related, And she goes, well, tell me about it. And I went to, I thought, send me an email. So I sent her a recording I did, and I put the shakuhachi flute on top of a hip hop drum track because I thought, oh, maybe she was interested in hearing it on Warrior. So I did that, and she wrote back, "Whoa, I've never heard anything like that. It's quite amazing, you know." And that was the extent of the email chat and conversation. 2 weeks later, on the next episode of Warrior, they wrote in that Father Jun's playing a flute. The character. So in season
perfect,
1,
yeah.
if you'll see Father Jun playing the flute right before the two tongs go to war. And, you know, it's sort of a conjuring, you know, a conjuring of the spirits, you know. And I went, whoa, I didn't think she would have me playing the flute on screen. And so when I was actually playing the flute, they had me record off camera some bits that might fit better, you know, in case that, because, you know, when you're shooting, you're just cutting and shooting. Like they wanted to have a little, 2-minute section that they could maybe edit together for the film. And so I did that, and then they got back and went, "Hey, we really like this, and I hope you don't mind. We're going to use just bits and pieces throughout the series." And so they did that throughout season 1 and 2, just based on that improvisation I did. But for season 3, they wanted me to actually play the score under a specific scene, which was incredible. Again, for a first for me, which I can't give away. So I played the flute under a scene. And then so I specifically went into the studio with a producer to record that. And it was a real, again, one of those moments of marrying two careers.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I never thought I'd see this day where I was marrying two different worlds, you know? It doesn't get better than that, man. It's like, you know, basically it's a dream come true in Warrior.
And you're getting paid to do it.
Just icing on the cake, you know, icing on the cake.
Yeah, I bet you'd probably do it for free if they asked you.
You know, I would because it's just spreading the joy of art, you know, just spreading art.
Oh man, that's a good story. Hey, could you send me a little something? I can play it here on the recording.
Of course. I'll send you the track that I sent Daniel Woodward. How's that?
Yeah,
I'll send you that track. Yeah,
that'd be awesome. Hey man, we're running out of time, but you got like 2 more minutes for a lightning round.
Of course.
All right, let's do this. So we got Perry Young here, Father Jun. So let me ask you a couple questions here. Who's killed more people, Ping Wu or Father Jun?
It's a tough one. It's a really tough one.
Tough.
But I would say Ping Wu because Father Jun actually hands it off to them.
He delegates.
You know? Yeah, delegates. Absolutely.
All right. Besides Father Jun, who's your favorite character on Warrior?
That's a really tough one.
I know. They're like your children,
really
right?
Tough one. I love them all. But I love them all. And I want to say this is only a subjective opinion, right? I love all my actors. I think that it's a toss-up between Olivia Chang and Diane Doan. Nice. You know, they're the two women, the two powerful women.
Yeah. So,
you know, it's just going to be a Chasu Bao to see who wins that one.
Both. We'll call it a tie. Yes. I have no problem with that. Hey, where's your favorite place to grab Chinese food in New York City?
Oh my God. Okay.
Another hard one.
Yes. Kanji Village in Chinatown.
Nice.
East Chinatown. Yeah.
Yeah. You go with the Yao Tu with that too? You get the greasy donut?
Oh, you do. You get the Yao Tu with the joke. Yeah. You can get everything. Very classically Chinese, Cantonese flavored. You can get this salted fish fried rice. You know what I mean? Yeah. You get the eggplant salted fish chicken. You can get the Chinese ginger broccoli beef. They're sort of like, you know, the staples, right? But they do it so authentic that you feel like you're at home.
How much does a bowl of juk cost you down there?
Oh man, prices have gone up, man.
I know.
I think it's about $7 now.
What? It used to be like $2.
I know, right? Absolutely. It's just crazy how much has gone up.
All right. Hey, what show is Perry Young watching these days?
Well, I just saw ABC.
Nice.
Thought it was fantastic.
Amazing,
right? My friend Leonard Wu plays the ox character in it. You know? I read that book to my kids when they were young. It was a little above them at the time, but I just thought it was fantastic that this graphic novel was out there. So you know, so great to watch. I binged on it.
Yeah, no, it's done so well and creatively too. Because we had Jin Yang on, and he's like, he didn't want to do a movie with it because of the Chinky character. He was like, how am I going to put this character on screen? And it's, you know, it's supposed to be offensive and it's supposed to be every bad stereotype. But they found a way to do it. Yeah.
They found a great way to do it with the Ke Huy Quan's character, right? They found a great way to do it. Yeah. You know, because when I first read the book, I just thought also, that character is like painful, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be done. You know, it has to be told, because I was there too. You know, any other Asian in the room, you're like, and especially if that Asian is like more recent, you know, fresh off the boat, you know, we would say an onion, a warrior. If that, you know, then you have to like stay, you know, keep the distance, right?
Right.
That's just, you know, that's unfortunately how that's a systemic, you know, internalized racism, right?
Yeah. No, but they did a great job with that. All right, and just to add some spice, not to lose you any friends, but what's the best coast, East Coast or West Coast?
You know, I'm the best of both worlds.
All right, yeah.
My friends here say, "Wow, you're a really mellow New Yorker." But when I go back to California, they said, "Man, you're really uptight these days."
Too intense.
Yeah. But I feel like I'm right in the middle. I'm more intense than I was when I was just from California, and I'm way more relaxed than a lot of New Yorkers I know. But let me tell you, you know, apples and oranges, you know. Right. Oakland, home of the Black Panthers. So much has happened, you know.
Yeah.
And in New York City, dance, theater, it's like you can reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
I you know, it's another Cha Siu Bao right there.
All right, and our signature question is, we ask our guests who their Infatuasian is. Infatuasian is anyone in the Asian community that you admire. Could be living or deceased, someone you know or someone you admire from afar. So Perry Young, you've named a lot of names today, but you got to pick one. Who is your Infatuasian?
It's got to be Bruce Lee.
Yeah. He's the GOAT.
He changed my life and continues to change my life.
Yeah.
Right? Like he was there in the beginning when I was a kid, gave me confidence. He was there when I was in school and I read about his philosophy about, like
be like
sharing the beauty. Yeah. And sharing the beauty of the Chinese culture. Right. Yeah. When Hollywood wouldn't let him do it, you know, because that's all I want to do is share the beauty of the Chinese culture. I don't want to play these gangsters and stuff like that. And then today, when I realize how much Bruce Lee is a unifier, still a real hero.
Still, yeah.
Right? Still, like he has unified, like when you look at our fan base, there's a lot of Black people who love Warrior. Right? So, I mean, Bruce Lee understands that solidarity and people, you know, so he's still a hero. He's still a big influence in my life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, shout out to my friend Omar, he's a Latino guy we used to work with, and he's the one who told me about Warrior. I didn't even know about it. So,
Omar, thank you so much.
It's still unifying, you know, it still speaks to anyone who's been othered, anyone who's on the outside, anyone who's felt a little stomped on. You know, and
he did it in the most beautiful way, because everybody who mentions, I love Bruce Lee, it's like, that's it. I love Bruce Lee. Right? Like regardless, when we were in South Africa and I would have a Bruce Lee shirt, I would see people from all walks of life, whether they're like, you know, poor Black on the streets or rich Black, you know, or poor white or rich white. All of them would say, "Hey, I love Bruce Lee." What does that say about his art and the you know, humanity of this person?
Man, I love that you channeled him on your audition too. That's just so perfect.
And there you go. He saved my life there again, you know?
He's still around, man. He's still alive.
Yeah.
All right, Perry. I appreciate this talk with you so much. I had so much fun.
Thanks, Curtis. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, no, you know, everyone out there, go watch Warrior. If you haven't caught up, I got to do a little catching up, I guess. We got some reveals coming soon. We won't spoil it, but yeah, that's amazing. So thanks so much for your time. And hey, have a great afternoon and a good lunch.
Thank you for having me on Infatuasian.
Yeah. All right. Father Jun, Perry Young, Ping Wu. So great to talk to you. We'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Yep. Thank you.
So that just about does it for this episode. What a great chat with Perry Young. And of course, you can follow Perry at Perry Young Official on social media. And if you want to know more about the flute playing, you can visit his website, youngflutes.com. And go watch Warriors Season 3 on Max. Well, it used to be called HBO Max, but you know where to find it. And it is so far just jaw-dropping. The fight scenes, everything has gotten better and better. If you watch the show, it has gotten better and better every season. So go check that out. And if you want to message us, you know how to get a hold of us. You can always follow us on Infatuasian Podcast on Facebook or Instagram, or you can write us a good old-fashioned email on infatuasianpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, please follow us and like us wherever you get your podcasts, whether it be Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And as usual, thank you so much for listening. And on behalf of Perry and myself, we hope that you're all happy, healthy, and safe out there. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks again. Bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks, man. That was great.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you. That was wonderful. I had a lot of fun.
No, I literally could do this all afternoon.
I know. You know, we don't get a chance to really like be in community, right? Like,
yeah.
But you know, big props to you for doing what you do, because that creates community.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's where, you know, out of the pandemic, just sitting here in my basement, I was like, what can I do, you know, with all this going on? And it's like, well, let's put some voices out there. Let's talk to creators.
Right.
You know, let's get some positivity out there. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. We need positivity. We need positivity. Yeah,
we do. You know, it's interesting that, you know, we can be 4th, 5th generation and still feel like we're outside, you know, still feel a little bit like we're not quite mainstream.
You know, and we have to kind of address why that is.
Yeah.
Right. Really, there's a reason why that is, and we have to just hit that thing with a hammer, right?
Yeah.
As long as we all agree as a community, that's the thing we should do, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you know, our community is quite diverse, right? It doesn't always agree on what the thing is, you know.
It's hard, yeah.
And the ones that call it out will say, "That's the one that makes us more American. What are you talking about?" You know.
Mm-hmm,
and so there's a lot of infighting, right? You know, you see it in the Black community also, you know.
Yeah.
But we have to find a language and find a reason like to unite, you know. And that's kind of my dream and goal is like, how do we find the language to unite ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Baby steps, we're getting there a little bit every day.
yeah, we are definitely getting there. Yeah.
All right, thanks again. Have a great lunch, and next time you want to come on, let me know. You're welcome here anytime.
Well, you know what? If you watched all seasons and you want to do a quick recap, and if you have a more idea what you want to talk about with Warrior, I'd be happy to jump back on.
All right, yeah. Hey, I'll take that anytime. Yeah, maybe when we're announcing season 4, we'll do it.
Whoa, that would be lovely.
We have fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. All right, Perry, have a great time.
Thanks, Curtis.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks again. Bye.
Bye.